The Project 1123 Kondor class, with a NATO reporting name of Moskva-class, was undoubtedly one of the most striking warships of the First Cold War. Despite some setbacks, two surface combatants of this class, with their impressive firepower and aviation capabilities, also marked a milestone in Soviet naval aviation. Today we're investigating the Moskva-class, the largest and most heavily armed helicopter cruiser. The Moskva-class was primarily designed for anti-submarine warfare, or ASW for short. Its role was to hunt NATO nuclear ballistic missile submarines while preventing attack submarines from entering bastions, the protected areas for Soviet ballistic missile submarines. The two vessels in this class also served as the flagship of the ASW task forces. Originally defined as Korabyle Prati-Volodochny Oborony Dalny Zoni, meaning long-range ASW ship, in 1965, the Soviet Navy reclassified them as Prati-Volodochny Kreyser, meaning ASW cruiser. NATO referred them as helicopter cruisers. In the late 1950s, the US Navy deployed George Washington-class submarines to the Mediterranean, capable of launching nuclear missiles at key Soviet cities within mere minutes of warning. The Soviet Navy staff swiftly convinced the Kremlin of the need for a helicopter cruiser to counter this threat in the Mediterranean. This new kind of warship was popular during those years. Just before the decade ended, France laid down Jeanne d'Arc, while Italy started building two Andrea Doria-class cruisers. Similarly, the Central Committee of the Communist Party approved the program for such ships on December 31, 1958. After evaluating 24 different projects, the Navy selected the design concept of the 17th Design Bureau in 1960. However, during the final design stage, numerous improvements were demanded, leading to delays and some flaws. The Soviet Navy did not officially approve the Project 1123 class until January 25, 1962. The first cruiser, Moskva, was laid down on December 15, 1962, launched on January 14, 1965, and commissioned on December 25, 1967. The second, Leningrad, was laid down on January 15, 1965, launched on July 31, 1968, and commissioned on June 2, 1969. Although some Western sources claim that the USSR intended to build 12 ships of this class, the initial plan was for only 2 vessels. The Navy later considered a third ship, Kiev, with a modified design in 1967. However, in 1969, it abandoned this plan in favor of the Project 1143 class heavy aviation cruiser, whose NATO reporting name is Kiev class. The steel hull featured a longitudinal framing system with 500mm spacing and ice reinforcements. To ensure durability, it employed a double hull design along the entire length of the bottom and was divided into 16 waterproof compartments. The unarmored hull could still withstand impacts from 3 or 4 anti-ship missiles, each with a 500kg warhead, or from 2 or 3 torpedoes, each with a 420kg warhead. It could even endure a near miss from a 30-kiloton nuclear warhead. The cruiser was designed to remain afloat if any 3 adjacent compartments or 4 forward compartments were flooded. The superstructure was built from an aluminum-magnesium light alloy. The Soviet Navy initially intended to equip the Moskva-class with gas turbines. However, this propulsion system had not yet been tested on a vessel of such large size. Therefore, it chose a high-pressure steam plant similar to those used by the Kinda-class cruisers. Nonetheless, the machinery of the first cruiser, Moskva, experienced serious issues and required reconstruction in 1973 after a fire. Exhaust gases were released into the atmosphere through cooling systems installed inside the funnels, which reduced the infrared signature. The engines were also mounted on vibration-proof platforms to minimize noise. These 2 measures had been implemented on a Soviet naval vessel for the first time. Though initially planned to be highly automated, allowing operation by a crew of just over 300, new demands during the final stages compelled engineers to increase the personnel count to 415. Ultimately, most systems did not function as intended, and the final sea trials revealed that the ship required a permanent crew of 670 to maintain combat readiness, surpassing the original design specifications. This doubling of personnel resulted in poor living conditions, with some sailors having to reside in engine rooms and weapon depots. In 1976, the torpedo tubes and some other equipment were removed to create more living space, but habitability did not significantly improve. Furthermore, the Soviet Navy increased the complement of the cruiser to 758 members in the mid-1970s and later to 850 in the 1980s. The Moskva-class included a medical block comprising a sick bay, an isolation ward, an operation room, and an outpatient clinic. Due to insufficient crew compartments and storage areas, the ship's endurance was limited to just 15 days. The Navy required a vessel capable of conducting search and destroy operations within an area of approximately 50 kilometers. 2 helicopters operating once daily would deploy sonar buoys for 24-hour monitoring along the perimeter of the surveyed rotor area. Another rotorcraft would be airborne to maintain communication with the most distant buoys. Then a pair of helicopters would be dispatched to the area to destroy the detected target. According to this tactic, the cruiser was required to carry at least 14 rotorcraft. Therefore, in typical operations, the Soviet Navy deployed 12 Ka-25PLs for ASW, 1 Ka-25PS for search and rescue, and 1 Ka-25C for over-the-horizon targeting on the ship. If required, this number could be increased to 18 rotorcraft, and the Mi-8 transport helicopters could also be accommodated. The flight deck measured 81 meters in length and 34 meters in width. The main hangar, located directly beneath the flight deck, was 67 meters long and 25 meters wide, capable of housing 12 helicopters, moved by a semi-automated system using chain conveyors. 2 10-ton capacity elevators connected it to the flight deck. The secondary hangar within the superstructure had a capacity for 2 rotorcraft and towing vehicles that moved the helicopters to the flight deck. Interestingly, Western sources in the 1970s praised the Moskva-class ships for their navigability in harsh sea conditions. In fact, the Soviet Navy initially aimed to have an ASW cruiser capable of operating its helicopters in Sea State 6. However, a rough Atlantic trial in 1970 showed that the Sea State 5 was the practical limit. In 1972, the Moskva's helicopter deck was replaced with heat-resistant steel plates. Also, a special landing platform made of AK-9F heat-resistant material was installed on top to prepare for the operational testing of vertical takeoff and landing aircraft, the Yak-36M, whose production version was later renamed as the Yak-38. After trials, they were removed. The complement of the Moskva-class is 850 people. The ship had a length of 189 meters, a beam of 34 meters, and a draught of 7.7 meters. Its standard and fully loaded displacements were 11,920 and 15,280 tons respectively. The propulsion system consisted of 2 45,000 horsepower TV-12 steam turbines, 2 2,012 horsepower TD-1500 turbine-type generators, and 2 2,012 horsepower diesel generators. Its top speed was 28.5 knots. The cruiser had a range of 16,670 kilometers, in other words, 9,000 nautical miles at an economical speed of 15 knots. The L-band MR-600 Voskhod and MR-310 Angara-A radars on the cruiser had detection ranges for air targets of 600 and 150 kilometers, respectively. The Moskva-class was also fitted with the MG-342 Orion variable depth sonar and the MG-325 Vega towed sonar, which could detect the submarine from 22 and 15 kilometers, respectively. The MVU-201 Korin 1123 Tactical Information Processing System, including the MARA-U Tactical Data Link, was utilized as a command and support system for real-time tactical information processing. The Moskva-class had 2 twin-arm B-189 launchers for the M11 Shtorm air defense missile, whose NATO reporting name is SAN-3 Goblet. With a 120 kg high-explosive warhead, the M11 had a maximum effective range of 32 km and a top speed of Mach 3.5. It was effective at an altitude of 25,000 meters. The cruiser carried 48 missiles. The Soviet Navy initially intended to equip the Moskva-class with 2 9K-33 ASA short-range air defense systems, but later abandoned this plan. The cruiser was armed with two 57mm 80 caliber twin-barrel AK-725 guns, each equipped with a magazine holding 2,200 rounds. Each gun had a rate of fire of 120 rounds per minute per barrel and an effective range of 12,700 meters. The ship was equipped with a twin-arm PRK-1 Vyuga launcher for the 82R ASW missiles. Capable of speeds of up to Mach 1.8, the missile carried a 10 kiloton nuclear depth charge to a range of 24,000 meters. The warhead could detonate at depths of up to 200 meters and had a kill radius of up to 1,500 meters against submarine targets. The cruiser carried 8 82Rs. The Moskva-class also had two RBU-6000 ASW rocket launchers and carried 120 RGB-60 rockets with a range of 5,230 meters and an effective depth of 1,000 meters. The initial two 5-tube 533mm PTA-53 1123 torpedo tubes were removed in 1976. A task force centered around the Moskva-class cruiser also included several Cushion-class destroyers and could scan an area of 225 to 330 square kilometers per hour. In some missions, other Soviet major surface combatants also took part in the fleet to extend coverage and strengthen a formidable anti-surface warfare capability. Immediately after commissioning, the Soviet Navy deployed the Moskva to the Mediterranean. She undertook a 48-day operational voyage covering 10,500 nautical miles, logging 552 helicopter flight hours and 96 hours of contact with U.S. submarines. On March 30, 1970, the Moskva's Orion sonar detected a nuclear submarine at a distance of 16.5 kilometers. Helicopters were subsequently deployed to maintain contact for more than 10 hours. In 1982, Moskva underwent a comprehensive modernization that lasted 7 years. Following this, sea trials commenced in 1990. However, afterwards, the First Cold War ended and the USSR collapsed. Due to economic difficulties, changing threat perceptions, and political uncertainty, she never commanded another ASW task force. The ship departed the port for the final time under the naval jack on May 26, 1993. Russia decommissioned Moskva on November 7, 1996, and she was scrapped in India. During her service period, the cruiser completed 11 operational missions spanning 1,112 days and covering a total distance of 183,768 nautical miles. Moskva lost two of her Ka-25 helicopters in accidents in 1967 and 1969. Leningrad played a vital role in the 40-day rescue efforts after the fire at the Soviet Hotel-class nuclear submarine K-19 in 1972. 2 years later, she led the Soviet task force in helping clear mines in the Suez Canal. During this mission, her helicopters logged a total of 339 flight hours in airborne mine-clearing operations. Unlike Moskva, Leningrad also operated in the Baltic Sea. She visited many African countries and Cuba. According to the original plan, the cruiser was to undergo the same modernization in 1990 as the Moskva. However, the end of the First Cold War also marked the end for her. The Navy decommissioned Leningrad on June 24, 1991, and she was scrapped in Greece. The cruiser executed 17 operational missions, covered a total distance of 279,035 nautical miles, and unlike the Moskva, she experienced no major accidents. Moskva and Leningrad were indeed impressive warships with their behemoth-like appearance, aviation capabilities, and high electronic and weapon capacities. Thankfully, they never found a chance to prove themselves in combat. Even so, the Moskva-class has always been among the unforgettable. Thanks for watching our video, and please don't forget to subscribe to our channel and click the bell button to be notified of our new videos. Also, you can now click the join button to support our channel. And as always, we would greatly appreciate all of your likes, comments, and shares.